I have the most problems with my hips. I feel like they get too loose when I walk and start grinding and popping. Any suggestions? Where is the grinding and popping coming from? Because we tend to use the term hips very loosely, and pun intended, but your hip socket, back up, is actually down here. We also refer to hips as being out here. Now this is really more your SI joint. So when people say, oh, my hips are out, a lot of times they're talking about their SI joint in the back versus their hip socket specifically. So the first step is looking at which it is for you. Now, if you're getting the grinding and popping kind of in the back through here, that's where you really want to focus on that symmetry. So when you're sitting equal weight on both sides. When you're standing, equal weight on both feet. Avoid when you standing to one side, avoid the leverage up. So I'll show you what I mean here. My disc. So when you go to stand up, you really want to keep yourself centered so that way you're coming up and you're using those glutes. What really takes off those joints in the back is when you start doing these like rotation things where you're kind of throwing yourself back and forth, or I'm gonna reach with one hand coming out and kind of throwing my hip out and then trying to pull myself up and around. All of those are really hard on that low back and that SI. So you want to make sure you straighten that out. Now, if it is actually your hip socket, and that can be sloppy for sure, and you can get grinding and popping in there, that is tend to be felt as groin pain. So it's not the outside as much as it is kind of right in that groin area. That is your hip joint itself. And for that, there's a couple things you want to watch. One, once again, you got to make sure you're using your butt muscles and your quad muscles to stand up. You want to make sure that you're not throwing yourself up. So when you come to stand up, even if you're not doing the funky twisty thing, you want to make sure as you're coming forward that you're not using your back to bring yourself up. You want to be coming up nice and even together, and your glutes are doing the lifting, your quads are doing the work, and your knees are not going over your toes. Because as soon as your knees start coming over your toes, this is all changing the force through your hip and your back. And you can be using this extra sloppy motion that you're really not supposed to have in the first place. But since you're hypermobile, you've got bonus movement in there. So you get to try and control that a little bit better. So engage your glutes. That'll make your hips feel like they rotate out just a little bit. That's a good thing. And then keep that core in so that way you don't overextend and shift that forward. And start to figure out where that center is, where you're in the middle. You're not up on your toes, you're not back on your heels, you're really kind of in the center of your feet. That makes a big difference. And then lastly, strengthen. If you're sloppy through those hip joints, you need hip rotator strengthening. So that's going to be doing band and ball work, working on those rotators. Let me show you what that looks like. So I love loop bands. You don't have to tie them. They're easy to use. I use them all the time, literally all the time. So for hip strengthening and stability, and this works for the back SI stuff as well. You're going to take your band and put it around your knees. Really doesn't matter if it has a fold in it or not, but what you're going to do is you're going to bring your knees out to the side and then control them coming back in. What we're working on are these muscles on the outside of our hips to pull our knees apart. You do not want our back trying to push them apart. I don't want your feet trying to roll out and push your knees apart. We really want all the movement coming from your hips. And this becomes a really great way to start to isolate that, to actually be in your body and figure out what is moving, what is working, what am I using, and make sure that what is moving is what is supposed to be moving. So you do 10 of those going out, and you're going to do 2 sets of 10. Colors of bands really don't matter. Colors tend to note resistance strength. The color setup really is dependent upon the brand itself. So a yellow in one brand can be equal to a green in a different band. So you just want to make sure that whatever band you're using, you have moderate resistance. Notice I said moderate, not a lot. This is not more is better. This is, you want to feel like you're working, but you don't want to be straining. Straining causes compensation. It makes you do weird things, and you don't want that. You also don't want it to be so light that it doesn't feel like you're doing anything. You want to actually be able to feel those muscles working and engaging. You also want to make sure you're controlling them coming back. If you just let your knees flop back, that's not good either. You want to really focus on that control. The range in terms of how far out your knees get, it doesn't really matter. That's actually not important. It's more important that you're staying through a happy range and controlling what you have. Now, second thing, and we're going to do is you can do squeezes. And actually I'm going to get rid of the band so I don't confuse you. But you're going to do squeezing your knees together. Now this balance disc works just fine. You can use a ball, you can use a pillow, you can roll up a towel, just something that gives you a little bit of give that you can compress against. So I am squeezing my knees, see, squeeze together, okay? Now with squeezing, same thing. I don't want my back working, I don't want my pelvis tilting. I'm going to keep myself nice and square. I'm going to engage the muscles on the inside of my thigh and that inside kind of groin area to pull my knees together. My feet, they're hanging out. They're not pushing. I'm not pushing on the inside of my feet. I'm just pulling from the inside of my thighs. And we're going to hold for a count of 5. And then we're going to relax. And then we're going to squeeze in again for another count of 5. And then you're going to relax. And you're going to do 10 of those. So you get the out for the hip, you get the in for the hip, and those help to work on stabilizing and controlling that hip motion, getting those muscles working correctly. You will not believe the number of people who we go to squeeze in and they're getting some weird muscle from the back side of their legs, from the outside of their hips, the outside of their calves, all of these other places that are really not supposed to be helping. We want to shift that back to the inside. So with your hip motion, check and see where it's coming from. Make sure that you have good mechanics. Make sure that you're engaging and stopping it straight, and start building up those hip rotator muscles that are going to be able to hold you in the position you need to be. I wanted to talk a little bit, it's not really a question, but I'm actually going to ask a question of you guys. I am really interested in getting some feedback on the type of pillows that you are using. So this would be, what is your favorite pillow? What have you found works really well for you with pillows? Whether you're a side sleeper or a back sleeper. And I'm doing some research and looking at comparing different types so that I can provide some better options for different types of sleeping positions with specifically different pillows for hypermobility. So if you have any thoughts, things that you have found that you love, like I would love all of that feedback. Just leave me some comments below and I would love to see that. As a general reminder for people with hypermobility, for sleeping position, sleeping is super, super, super important. If you have pain when you wake up in the morning, you are not sleeping well, you have a sleeping problem. If your pain is more as the day progresses, but when you get up in the morning you feel great, your sleeping is good, you keep doing what you're doing. In general, you need to make sure that if you're sleeping, you can sleep on your back, and you can do pillow under the knees or not. It's actually optional. Hypermobile people can sleep on their side, that works well. But you cannot do the leg hike. And all my hypermobile clients know the leg hike because I can back up here so I can show you. So if you're doing the leg hike, you're doing that. You're on your side, but you're pulling that leg up. That is going to be a problem always. Back SI stuff, hip stuff, if you're doing that, that's contributing, I can tell you that. So you've got to make sure that your legs stay straight, stacked one on top of the other. So they can be bent, they can be straight, they can be anywhere in between. So if you're going to be on your side, you can be anywhere you want here. You just can't do the twist forward or back. Now, sleeping on your stomach. People with back issues, abdominal issues, love sleeping on their stomach because it makes that part feel better. The problem with hypermobility, and actually more than hypermobility, is necks. If you sleep on your stomach, it's typically just a matter of when you have a neck problem, not if you will have a neck problem. So that is something you want to keep in mind. If you don't currently have a neck problem, you probably have some time to work with, but if you tend to be somebody who has neck pain and a lot of headaches, and you like to sleep on your stomach, that can be a huge, huge contributor. So please start looking at that as you're thinking about your pillow and what you think is the best pillow option for you and your hypermobility.